So I want to start by saying thank you everyone for coming. My name is Cody Armstrong, and today we're talking about drawing basics in Onshape. So really intended for those that are just getting started, maybe just creating your first drawing. We're going to cover creating drawings, inserting views, dimensions, annotations, those kinds of things. As I always say with these webinars, we really encourage you to ask any questions that you'd like. You have a questions dialog and you go to webinar control panel, feel free to type anything in. I'll do my best from time to time to stop and make sure that all the questions are addressed. But if I don't get to your question, stick around and I'll make sure after the webinar to make sure any outstanding questions are answered. So again, feel free to ask any questions as we're going along here. Now, before I get into the topic of the day, there are a few things about Onshape I'd like to mention in general. And one of the first is our mission statement, and that is getting everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere. And this includes mobile devices. So if you haven't downloaded the Onshape app for your Android or your iOS device, your iPad, iPhone, Android phone, or tablet, I definitely recommend it. There's a free Onshape app, and it's a real CAD tool. You can create sketches and parts and assemblies on a mobile device, so it's not just a viewer. So again, everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere, and this also includes any computer. Linux, Chromebooks, Mac, Windows. You have accessibility from any computer with an internet connection. So everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere. That's our goal. Now, a few other things I'd like to mention about Onshape in general. The first is we do consider ourselves professional 3D CAD. And when you think of that, it's generally three pieces. You have parts, assemblies, and of course drawings. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. Now, of course, we have all three pieces that make up a professional 3D CAD system, but we do have some things that are very unique to us. One of the first things I always like to point out that is unique is we're evolving very quickly. So you're going to see Onshape update roughly every 3 weeks. It's not like a traditional CAD system where you're waiting a year for substantial updates. Roughly every 3 weeks, Onshape updates. And the neat thing about it is from a user perspective, you don't have to do anything. There's no downloads, there's no installs. You log in and new features are there. So evolving very quickly, but we also have some features built in that makes the process simpler. So with Onshape, you have built-in version control. You don't have to do a separate data management system or separate software to manage your files. That concept is gone in Onshape, and we have an integrated version control. It's built into the core functionality of Onshape. Also, we have the ability to import and export common CAD formats that are out there. So if you have a library of CAD files in a standard format or even native formats, SolidWorks, Inventor, Creo, we can import and export a lot of these common CAD formats that are out there. So it makes Onshape a great tool, even if you're using another CAD system as a tool alongside your CAD system, maybe just for sharing or for collaboration, right? So we can read and write a lot of common CAD formats that are out there. This includes, just based on the topic of the day, DXF and DWG. So if you have a library of DXF and DWG files, you can import those and even edit them inside of Onshape. So a great tool for working alongside existing CAD systems. Now, the last thing I want to mention is with Onshape, we've introduced entirely new methods of collaboration. Being a web-based app, we can do a lot of things that you can't do in a traditional CAD system, including real-time simultaneous editing. So 2 or 3 people can work together on the same model at the same time. You don't have the issue of who has the file, who has write access, or who has it checked out. All of those issues go away with Onshape. Also, not just real-time collaboration, but you have the ability to see each other's screen in real time and add integrated comments without having to send screenshots back and forth. So we really have taken a step back to look at how users collaborate and try and improve the experience. So these are just a few things I'd like to mention about Onshape. If you're just getting started, these are definitely some topics that are worth checking out. But what we're going to talk about here today, of course, the topic of the day is drawings. And really what I wanted to do is just get you started with drawing. So if you've never created a drawing in Onshape, I'm going to walk you through the process. So an introduction to drawings, how to create a drawing, how to choose a template, a very important part of the process, inserting views. How do I insert views into the drawing? And then, of course, dimensions, notes, tables. There's all sorts of annotations. I'm going to get into centerline, center marks, and so on. I also want to focus a bit on importing and exporting. So again, if you have a library of DXF or DWGs, I'm going to walk you through how to import and then also how to export. So if you want to save your Onshape drawing as a DXF or a DWG or a PDF, I'll walk you through how to do that as well. The last thing I want to mention here today is importing your own template. So we have the ability to import and use your drawing template as long as it's in a certain format, which I'm going to discuss later. I'll walk you through that process as well. So we do have a lot of things to cover. They go relatively quickly. So again, feel free to ask any questions as we're going along. The last boring slide that I have for you, I swear, is importing and exporting drawings. So what formats can we import and export? And this is just a commonly asked question I'd like to get out of the way. We can import and export DXF and DWGs. We can also export your drawings as PDFs. Okay, so just keep this in mind when we're talking about specifics of drawings. These are the formats that we can import and export. Okay. You have the ability to choose versions when we do things like export. That was a recently added feature. But again, trying to make it as compatible with any system that you have as possible. So that's it. Let's jump into creating a drawing. Now, there are a few things I want to mention up front, and the first is, if you've created your first drawing, it may be a little slow here to get started. I want to walk the new user through creating their first drawing. So all the steps in the process to get started. So let's walk through that. Now, let's assume that you've spent some time, you've built your first part in Onshape, maybe your first assembly in Onshape, and you're ready to create a drawing of that part or assembly. How do you get started? Where do I go? What do I do? One of the first things to keep in mind with Onshape is the drawing is just another tab in your document. So you have tabs at the bottom for parts, assemblies, and drawings are just going to be another tab within your document. Now, much like creating a new part or creating a new assembly, you can create a new drawing by going to the Create tab menu in the bottom left corner. So I left-click Create tab, and you'll see the option to create drawing. Okay. Now, as soon as you click Create Drawing, it prompts you to choose a template. So I mentioned before, the templates are kind of a key part to how we create drawings. So one of the first things you're greeted with when you click Create Drawing is, okay, what template do you want to use? And I want to point out a few things about the template options here. First off, if you're just getting started, maybe this is your first drawing and you just want to choose a standard template, there are Onshape provided templates on the left side. So you'll see a filter that says Onshape, and if you left click it, you'll see a list of templates that you can start from. These are kind of, stripped down, bare, essential templates. They give you a simple title block and, kind of the basics to get started. Okay. So I definitely recommend, if you have nothing, if you don't have any templates to work with, or if you're just starting your first drawing, to use one of the Onshape provided templates just to get understanding for how things work. If you want to use your own custom templates later, I'm going to walk you through that as well. Question: can we simulate mechanical efforts and mechanical properties based on design and material chosen? With the App Store, the Onshape App Store, you have many different finite element analysis tools that allow you to simulate loads and even fluid dynamic tools. Onshape itself that's not integrated. That you want to use one of the Onshape apps that are provided. Some of them even run in the browser, like Onshape itself, but you have a lot of options. So if you haven't checked out the Onshape App Store, just real quickly, a bit of a tangent, but if you haven't checked this out, on the Documents page in the bottom left, there's a button, Go to App Store, and there's a list of apps for all different things: FEA, rendering, fluid dynamics, CAM, all kinds of different categories. So definitely worth checking out if you haven't already, the Onshape App Store. Okay, so back to where we were. I create a drawing, and I'm prompted to choose a template. Now again, if I'm just getting started, I would recommend using one of the Onshape provided templates. A key thing to keep in mind is you must choose a template that corresponds with the units that you've modeled in. So I've modeled this part in inches. I want to make sure to choose a template that specifies inch. You'll see that some specify millimeter. So I have ANSI millimeter, and of course anything ISO will be metric as well. Right. So in this case, I want to make sure to choose the correct template based on the units that I've modeled this in. So we'll start this with an ANSI C template. Right. There are a few other things that I want to point out here. Now, one of the first and probably one of the most important is this custom template option. So if you don't care for any of the standard out-of-the-box templates, you can build a template on the fly. Now, this is not stored, but it allows you to really quickly define all the specs of your template, whether it has a title block, how many rows it has, whether there are views, first or third angle projection, another commonly asked question. So you can kind of piece together this custom template on the fly and then create it and then start building your drawing. So you don't have to import your templates. You don't have to go through the energy of creating a template if all you want to do is change a simple setting here or there. So I do want to point out this is the custom template option. It allows you to build drawing templates on the fly. But also going back to the existing template option, you have your own template options here. And I'm going to go over later how you can import a DWT file and use it as your template. So if you have DWT template files, I'm going to walk you through that process. So enough about templates. We're going to come back to them later. I'm going to choose the ANSI C, as I mentioned before, hit the blue button, OK. Now, as I mentioned before, it really just creates another tab in the document. So you'll see at the bottom here, a new tab has been created called Drawing 1. Okay. Immediately, I'm prompted to choose the part or assembly that I want to insert into my drawing. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Immediately, you're going to get a pop-up saying, what part or assembly do you want to insert? In this case, I want to insert the rocker. So I'll left click. As soon as I do that, I get a preview dialog of the view, and then I can move that to where I want to place it, left click again, and it places that drawing view. Okay, so very easy. The key thing there is select the part that you want to create a drawing of. Okay. Now, it automatically assumes that you want to insert that first drawing view, but from there you have a number of different options and things that I want to get into. So I want to work my way kind of from left to right in terms of the drawing toolbar, and one of the first things I want to mention is sheets. One of the commonly asked questions we get is, do I need to create a tab for every single drawing in my document, in my project? And the answer is no. You can have as many sheets within one drawing as you would like. So I can insert as many sheets and have everything, all the drawings related to the document inside of one tab. Okay, so that's insert sheets, and that's the very first icon, by the way, to create more sheets. Now the next one I want to get into, and we're going to come back to this in just a bit, is the properties. And the next icon looks like a wrench, and the idea behind it is it allows you to set all the various properties of this drawing. So if the text size is too small, for example, I can bump that up. If I want to change the decimal places, the number of decimal places visible, I can change that in this drawing. Leading and trailing zeros, gap between text, and there's all kinds of little settings that allow you to tweak this individual drawing. But I'm going to come back to this in just a bit. But that is the properties right next to sheets. Then we get into really the meat of the drawing's functionality, starting with drawing views. Now, a moment ago, I inserted a front view. And really what that does is it launches the first icon here, the drawing view command. So if I left click this, I get the same dialog that appears. And basically, it's a dialog that allows you to choose your part. Remember, if this isn't the part that I want, it's defaulting to this because I've already chosen it. You can select this icon and browse to other parts or assemblies. Okay. And then I choose the orientation that I want. So this is for your standard drawing views, front, top, right, isometric, so on. So you can choose your standard drawing views and place them, right, front, top, right, much like I did with the very first one here. But I want to show another technique, and that is the next icon over, the projected view command. So I can select projected view, left click, then left click the drawing view I want to project off of, and then it projects a view in the direction I drag my cursor. Right? So if I wanted a right projection, I'd move my cursor to the right. Right? If I want a top projection, I'd move it to the top. Once you're satisfied with the location and the position of the drawing view, you left click, and it places the projected view. Question. Properties stored with the sheet size. There are properties associated with a drawing, and this is a bit of a tangent, but it's worth pointing out here is, things like the title block and filling out all this information, there are linked values that you can go in and enter. So I can add a description, for instance, to the drawing and have it populate um, this title block. I can add metadata to the actual drawing and have it populate. So just keep that in mind. You can fill out the title block. Forgive me if I'm not answering the question correctly here, but you can fill out the title block with properties stored within the drawing. So right click and select properties. Keep in mind though that this is something we hope to expand in a much greater degree in the near future. Right now, this is, you're still filling out a series of properties associated with it, and it populates the title block. Some neat things though is, things like the sheet number, for instance, are automatically recognized. So when you create a new sheet, it'll become one of two, for example. Okay, so I've mentioned projected view. Let's do two more. I'm going to select projected view, left click the view, drag my cursor to the right to create a right projection, and left click to place it. I'm going to do that one last time, left click, and we'll create our isometric view. So we've created a simple set of orthogonal views, right? So front, top, right, isometric, your standard part drawing. Now there are some things I want to point out before we get into some of the other drawing views. Just some commonly asked questions. What if I wanted to change the scale, or what if I wanted to show it the part differently? If you right click anywhere inside of the view, you're going to see options like show hidden lines and hide tangent lines. You can create projected views from the right click, but more importantly, properties. So if you go to properties, you have things like the view scale. Another commonly asked question, how do I change the scale of the drawing view? And that option's here. You can also rotate it, but keep in mind that it only drawing views with no parent-child associations, no projections off of them, for example, can be rotated. So this drawing view cannot be rotated because I've projected other views off of it. But you have the option to rotate. You can add a scale label if you'd like, but just some important options I want to point out. And again, right click anywhere in that view and you'll see that list. Properties is where you find the scale. So let's move on. Now, I've added my simple views, but let's go over a few of the other drawing view tools that we have here. And one of the next ones I'm going to cover is Auxilary View. And the idea behind an Auxilary View is it projects a view normal to an edge, for example. So here I have this front view, and I want to project a drawing view normal to this edge of the part. So I can left click, drag up, and you'll see it creates a drawing view relative normal to the edge that I selected in the front view. Okay, so that is the auxiliary view, and you're using a part, or I should say an edge of a drawing view as a reference. So that is auxiliary view. The next one in my list is, of course, the section view. Right, section view tool. The key thing with the section view is you left click it, is you have an option for how you want to define the section view. If you want a horizontal or a vertical section view. You can define the view label. So if you want something other than A, you can change it. And then basically as you move the cursor out, you're going to see a either horizontal or vertical center line. And you can then take that center line and attach it to where you want the drawing view sectioned. Now this gets into the topic of attaching things. So as I move my cursor over this drawing view, you'll notice these little indicators appear allowing me to snap. So that's snapping to the middle, for instance, and that's snapping to the edge. And if you look really closely, I'm not sure if this is going to come across in the GoToWebinar, but there's actually changes. So that's a square, that's a triangle, right? That's a square. If I move down, for instance, to this circle, it highlights the center point with a circle. The reason I bring this up is those cues, the square, the triangle, here's the square, here's the triangle, they mean something. So the square means the end point of the edge or line. The triangle means the midpoint. So you can snap to the midpoint of any edge or line. And then the circle means center point. So you do get some visual feedback as to what you're attaching your reference to. Now in my case, I want to attach this center line to the center of the bore on this part. So I left click and it places the section view line. Then I can move my cursor to wherever I want to place my section. Now, a commonly asked question is, how do we flip the direction of the section view? And the answer to that is moving it in the corresponding direction. Right? So if I don't care for the orientation of this section view, I can move it to the other side and it flips the section view orientation. Remember, after you place the view, you can move it, to the other side. You can move it really anywhere you'd like. So just keep that in mind. When you initially place and move your section view, that's how you define its direction. Okay. Once that's done, left click, and of course, you have your section view. Okay. Now, a few things to point out about section views, but really, a lot of these views in general, is they're aligned. And what that means is this top view is actually driving the location of the section view. And actually, the top view itself is driven off a projection from the front view. So these views will remain aligned. If I drag one, they move together. Okay. So there are a few things I want to point out about that. One of the first is, how do I get rid of it? And then the commonly asked question, if I wanted this section view someplace else, you can right click it and you'll see an option to break the alignment. And at that point, it becomes a free floating drawing view. You can move it anywhere on the page. So just keep that in mind. By default, when you do a projected view or when you do a section view, it's aligned. It's aligned with the parent. But you can break that if you right click and choose the option to break alignment. Doesn't have the ability. Forgive me, just one second. Does it have the ability to show oblique views? It's a very good question. Right now, our view tools are limited to what you see here. We have the projected views, drawing views, auxiliary views, section views, and detail views. I have seen some methods for getting, odd view shapes or odd orientations by actually manipulating the part, doing something like a transform on the part itself, the 3D model. That's something that we hope to improve in the near future, is the ability to really create a view from any orientation and use that in your drawing. But as of today, again, these tools are what we have, so you'd have to manipulate the model in the 3D to get it to show in the orientation you prefer. Okay, so that's the section view command. Again, the key thing with the section view is just keep in mind that you're really just placing that center line. Wherever that center line is, that's where it's sections. And the other thing to keep in mind is, as you drag the views back and forth, just keep in mind that that is how you define the orientation of the actual view. So what I'd like to do next is get into the detail view command. Now, the detail view, real quickly, question, can't move section AA label. No, the section AA label is tied to the view itself. So it is attached, so to speak. So let's move on. Now, what I'd like to do is get into a detail view command. A detail view is very simple. You have the detail view command in the toolbar, and then you left click to place a circle. Right? So let's say I wanted to detail the top right corner here, left click, draw my circle, left click again, and I have my detail. Okay. Unlike the others, this one is not aligned in any way. You can place it anywhere on the drawing view that you'd like. Okay, so there is detail B, gives you the scale information. But again, very simple. Really, the key thing there is keep in mind the circle defines the depth of the detail view. It defines the location of it, the center of it. And the neat thing is you can actually manipulate this later. So I can go back and say, okay, this wasn't quite right the first time I placed it. Left click and drag the detail view, and it will move. It will update. Okay. So just keep that in mind. You can move it around anywhere you'd like. So I can shift the center point or the diameter of the detail view after I've created it. Okay, so those are the drawing view tools. And again, I think they're pretty straightforward. Most of them are just references to edges or other drawing views. But in the case of like a section view or a detail view, you're really just attaching a line or a circle, and then it just defines the information from there. So let's move on. Now, again, forgive me, I think there was one not displaying there. Just to recap a detail view one more time. Detail view, I can draw a circle, right? And the circle defines the detail view. As soon as you move your cursor, you get the detail view attached to it. Just left click to place it. Okay. So again, it's really about attaching that circle to wherever you want the drawing view from. All right, so moving on. Now we've covered all the various drawing view options. What I'd like to get into next are a few of the different dimension tools that we have. So you can see it's kind of broken up. Here we have our drawing views, then we get into the dimension tools. Now the dimension tools are pretty straightforward, and it really depends on what type of geometry that you're referencing. For many dimensions, a 2-point linear dimension is what you're looking for. And it's pretty straightforward. I left-click the 2-point linear dimension, and I left-click 2 points. Right? So let's say I want the distance between these two centers. Left-click, move my cursor up, left-click one last time to place the dimension. Okay, so real straightforward. Again, let's do that one more time. Left-click, place my dimension. Okay, so it's very easy for me to go in and add a series of dimensions to all the various drawing views by just using a basic dimension tool. All right, so again, the idea behind it is with a 2-point linear dimension, you're just selecting 2 points, and it gives you a linear dimension between those 2 points. However, it has some limitations, and I want to point out one of the limitations here now. Let's say, for example, I wanted a linear dimension from this point parallel with this edge. If I select the point, and if I select the edge, you are not, at least in this case, going to get a dimension that's parallel with that edge, right? You get a number of different orientations, vertical, horizontal, even in an angle here, but you're not getting one parallel to the edge of the model. And this is an example where a point line dimension comes into play. So I select point line, I can select the point, then the edge, and it automatically applies a dimension parallel to that edge. Okay, so there will be situations where the 2-point linear doesn't work for you, and then you have options of point line and even line dimensions. So same concept, except the difference is you're selecting 2 lines. Line, and of course the dimension comes out parallel with those lines. Question: can you alter the position of the identifier letter with the detail view? And that's much like the section view. This, I assume you're referring to the note attached to the bottom of it. It is attached to that detail view. You can double click and edit it, but moving it physically with respect to the detail view, no, it's attached. Okay, so what I'd like to do is get into the next dimension type. Now, I've mentioned a few different dimensions. The simple 2-point linear, which will do many of the dimensions you need. But then we get into some of the specifics, like a point line or a line to line, where I need the dimension relative to 2 edges, for example. But what about angle dimensions? So I can select angular dimension and select line, and as long as those 2 lines are not parallel, I get an angle value. Forgive me, I'm just going back real quickly to a question asked earlier. Can you alter the position of the identifier letter for the detail view? And I believe, forgive me, I think I had this wrong, he's referring to this identifier, and you can rotate it. So you can move that around by grabbing and dragging, left click and drag. I mentioned this before, but yeah, you can grab and manipulate this, both the diameter and the point, and you can also grab the center point and move it around as well. and that drawing view will live update to it. Okay, so that is the angular dimension. Again, the key thing there is you're just selecting two lines, and if they're not parallel, it will give you the angle value between them. Okay. So let's get into the next one, and this is a bit of a different type of angular dimension, but if I wanted the angular value between 3 points, this is a useful command for it. So I can select 3-point angular, and I go point, 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 and I get an angle value between those points. Okay. So useful if you need to determine the angle between 3 points or 3 references in general, but you may not have easy edges to identify that angle, right? So that is the 3-point angular dimension. The next one in the list is radial dimensions, and like the name implies, these are intended for radiuses. So again, very simple. Left-click radial dimension, left-click a radius. Left-click one last time to place it, and there is my radius dimension. Okay, so I kind of a consistent theme through many of these dimensions. You left-click the command, left-click the entity or entities, and then left-click to place the actual dimension. Okay. So that's a radius dimension. Again, it's just attaching to any circle or arc. And then I have diameter dimension. And again, very similar to radius. You mouse over the geometry you want to reference, left-click, left-click. The only real difference here is, of course, it places the diameter symbol. Right, so you can see I have the diameter symbol in the dimension for me. So now that we've added a number of different dimensions, I want to point out one last thing with regards to some of these dimensions. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to edit a value, or I wanted to add a tolerance to one of these dimensions. If you left-click any one of the dimensions, you're going to see a little box appear just to the top of your cursor. And if you move your cursor over that box, a flyout appears, allowing you to add anything that you would like to the dimension. You can add text, you can add a tolerance, you can add symbols, you can add all kinds of information here. So just keep in mind, again, left-click the dimension. You'll see the little flyout, mouse over it, and it expands. Okay? And you can add anything you like. So I can add maybe typical, right? TYP or 3x. You can add symbols, so I can add diameter symbols or centerline symbols or depth symbols. So you have that capability as well. But I think the commonly asked one is, what about tolerances? Can you define tolerances? So you have symmetrical, deviation, limits, basics as different tolerance options. And then once you define one of these, you can define the individual details of that tolerance. Okay. So again, tolerance support, symbols, even custom text can be added to dimensions by left-clicking the dimension and mousing over that window to have it fly out. There's another very good question. Does Onshape have fully functional GD&T Y14.5 2009 callouts good enough for precision manufacturing? We do have a number of those different callouts. I am not certain if we have every single one. That's something I would have to look into, but we're going to get into geometric tolerancing and blocks in specific in a second. But we have a number of those different callouts. I'm not certain if we have every single one. But I do know that we have a number of users using Onshape drawings for precision manufacturing every day. So it is a very common practice. Now, I mentioned the dimension properties. You left-click one, you mouse over it, and you have the options for everything that you can set in the dimension itself. One last thing on dimensions, and I'm going to move on, is we also have ordinate dimensions. And this is a bit of an aside. If you care for ordinate dimensions, we have that option as well. And the neat thing is you identify your point, and then everything you do from that point gets automatically referenced. And it'll even do the jogs for you. So here's a few ordinate dimensions just for an example. And so you can identify a reference and then add your ordinate dimensions after that point. You can even right-click a dimension and add more to it. So if you want to add more to this ordinate dimension group, you can. But just keep that in mind. Ordinate dimensions are options as well. Now, The next thing on my list is a datum. And a datum is a very easy thing to apply. It's very much like a dimension. So I can select datum, right? And then attach my datum to whatever reference I want to attach it to. So let's say I want to attach it to the center of this hole, left click, and I have my first datum. Okay. So again, it's just a matter of left clicking to place. And if you add another, if I go back to this, let's go here. I can reference that. Let's do it the other side as my datum as well. Okay, so, and it'll automatically increment to the next letter. A question. I cannot dimension from a center line to an edge. Forgive me if I'm not sure if referring to the actual line command or using a 2-point center line or a line-to-line center line. So forgive me. If not, I'll try it in just a moment. The one thing I would say is if you're having an issue, if you're having any kind of an issue where you don't understand what's going on, maybe you think that it should work this way and it doesn't, I would encourage you to give us feedback. There's a feedback mechanism in the help tool. Send any issues that you have through the feedback. The neat thing about it is it's automatically captured by our support team and ticketed. You automatically get any information updates. If it's resolved, you'll get an email. So just keep those things in mind. You have a feedback mechanism. It's very easy to do. You don't have to fill out tons of information, but it's useful in situations like that. If you're having an issue, dimensioning to an edge, for example. So the next thing in my list is geometric tolerance, and in particular tolerance blocks. And you can go through and define geometric tolerance blocks. And I can define perpendicularity callouts or concentricity callouts with a tolerance symbol. So just keep that in mind. You have the option. I can define tolerance and add a few bits of information here. The different class fits, primary, secondary, and tertiary references for datums. Green check OK, and it will place a tolerance symbol. Okay, so I can attach it to the bottom left corner, for example. Okay. Or I can attach it to a reference of the edge, an edge of the part, for example. So you have all kinds of different options. Now, the question came up earlier, what kind of symbols and callouts do you have? As I mentioned before, we have a number of different callouts depending on the type of geometry that you're referencing. But position callouts, parallelism, perpendicularity, concentricity are all good examples of that. So that is geometric tolerancing, and again, very simple. The idea there is you fill out the block and then you attach it to whatever reference you want to attach it to. The next thing on my list is a simple note, and this is probably one of the easiest commands in Onshape drawings because it's really just a few clicks. Right? I select note, I left click where I want to place the note, the top left corner, drag my cursor down to where I want the bottom right corner to be, left click again, and type in my text. Okay. Now, some things I want to point out. You have a few different font options. A commonly asked question is, how come I'm not seeing my computer's fonts? Keep in mind that, we wanted to choose fonts that you can access from any computer, right? So these are a list of freely available fonts that you can access, whether you're running Windows, Mac, or Linux. The font list will be the same. You can define the font height. You can define whether it's bold or italic. You have strike-through options, but the neat thing is you have options like center justify and middle align, right, which will center the note. And this becomes particularly useful when you're creating notes within the title block, because I can center the note perfectly within that cell in the title block. Right? Now, just an aside, while we're on the topic of notes, many of the things will automatically be populated in the drawing title block, but you can double click to change any one of them and then just type in new text. Right? So if I didn't fill out the properties of the drawing like I mentioned earlier, I can just double click a note and then type in any simple text that I'd like to fill them out. Okay? So that is the note, and the next one on my list is a note with leader, and it's very similar, of course, to what I just covered. The main difference here is instead of just being a note that's in space, you can see like this note is just in space. I can move it around anywhere on the drawing. What I'd like to do with a note with leader is attach it to something. I want to attach it to some kind of a reference. So I can select a note with leader, and then we'll zoom in here. I want to attach it to this edge of the part, left click, and we can type in our note, right? Deeper edges. Again, I have all the same options we talked about just a second ago. Green, check OK. And now I have a simple note with a leader. Okay. So those are the two note commands. You have a simple note and a note with leader. The next one on my list is the balloon command. Now, balloons, of course, are especially useful when we start talking about assembly drawings and creating assembly drawings. Now, the neat thing about balloons is they will automatically increment. So I can add a balloon, and I can go to another view, for instance, add another balloon, and it automatically increments to the next number. Now, this immediately begs the question of, well, how does this behave in assemblies? Is it linked in any way? And this is something that we're working to improve. Right now, we have the ability to add the balloons and create a general table, which gives you the ability to create your assembly drawing, with references to each part in the assembly. What we hope to add in the future is a little bit more intelligence. So it automatically populates the bill of materials and it automatically populates all the balloons. And those are things that we're working on. But as of today, we have a simple balloon tool. You place the balloons and you can fill out your general table. And so we want to give you access to those tools and give you the ability to create them. Now, just keep in mind that what we have available today is going to evolve and evolve very quickly. So you're going to see automated tools for dimensions and view creation and bill of materials creation. And these are all areas that we're going to improve. But that's, again, a very simple balloon command. You can double click the balloon and change the label to anything you'd like. You can add any bit of text there that you want, and you can grab and drag and move it around if you choose to. So very simple and very similar, by the way, to a note in the sense that you're really just attaching it as a reference and then left click to place it. Now, the next thing that I want to mention is the table command. So in the far right of the toolbar, on the far right of some of these annotations, is the table command. And this table command is meant to be a general purpose table. It gives you the ability to just create a table, whether you want a table of whole sizes or you want a table of bin radiuses. There's all kinds of examples of people inserting tables into the drawings. The most common, of course, being a bill of materials. As of today, we have a general purpose table, and it can do a number of different things as long as you go through and fill it out. Now, a question, are bombs customizable within a drawing? You'll see in a second that our general table is just that. It's a table with nothing in it, and then you can go in and fill out that information. So I left-click table. I define the number of rows and columns. I define if there's a title or header row. Okay? And then I place it. Now, a tip about placing it is you first, much like a note, left-click to identify the top left corner, then drag out and define the bottom right corner. Left-click one last time, and you have your general table. And I could say, this is a whole table, or if this is an assembly, I could start building my bill of materials. Now, obviously, we want to improve on this experience. So you're going to see things like, again, I mentioned before, automated tools to fill out the bill of materials, or automated tools to insert this information. But as of today, it's a general purpose table, so you can add anything you would like to any one of these cells. Some bits about the table, you may have seen it there, but if I left-click a cell or a series of cells, if I window select, for instance, or if I command-shift a whole bunch of cells, you'll see that I can tweak the table, I can edit or remove columns, I can merge cells if I have several cells selected. So you do have some table editing functionality in there as well. You can change the table up a bit, add or remove cells and columns and so on. But that is the general purpose table. You'll see it here in the far right. Again, to place it, you have to define the size, then left-click the top left corner, and then the bottom right corner. Okay. Another question, can these drawing views be shaded rather than wireframe? The answer is no, not as of today. You have the hidden edges visible or lines option. You have show hidden lines, but those are the options for display styles as of today. Okay? That's another area that we're hoping to improve very soon. Okay, so moving on. Now, the next thing in my list is a 2-point center line. And the 2-point center line is a very simple command. You select 2-point center line, and you select 2 points. So left click, and now I have my center line, right through the middle of, in this case, a bore. I can left click and drag this. So if I wanted to resize this center line, I can do that. Just keep that in mind. You can resize, with respect to the model. You can even make it shorter than the model if you care to. But just keep in mind, very simple to do, and that is the center line. The key thing with the center line is it's dependent on 2 points. So you left click a point, and you get a line between those 2 points. Now the next one is a bit different, and that is the line-to-line center line. And the idea behind it is if you don't have 2 simple points that you want to reference for your center line, you can select 2 lines, and a center line will be placed between them. Right, so it doesn't matter what the geometry is. And the neat thing is, if I didn't have an easy point to click on, but I have these 2 parallel lines, I can easily add a center line between them. Right. So that is the center line command. You have both a 2-point center line and a line-to-line center line. Now, the last command that I want to cover before we get into just a simple line tool is the center mark. And center mark, again, very simple. You select center mark. You left click any circle or radius to add a center mark. Okay. So again, the idea behind it is just left click the command, left click where you want to place it. Question: with Onshape being a web-based, is it understood that a user cannot import an Excel file, or embed an image into the drawing? I wouldn't say that that's assumed. We can embed a DXF or an image into a 3D model, so the tools are there. You can import an Excel file into a document. Unfortunately, the tools are not there to embed that in a drawing as of yet. But you can embed an image file into a 2D sketch. So the tools are definitely there. It's just in terms of drawing capabilities, it's not there yet. So just keep in mind, we're not limited to the ability to import. You can import any file into a document that you want. It's really the ability to then import that file into your drawing, which is something, again, that we hope to be able to do in the future. We hope to have the ability to have the user embed their own company logos and customize their templates in any capacity, and that's something that we're working on. All right, so that is the center mark command. You, again, select any circle, any radius, and it automatically applies the center mark to the center of that circle or radius. So a very simple command. Now, the last one on my list is the simple line. And if you're really just looking for a general straight line, this is the tool for it. It's very similar to drawing a line in a 2D sketch. Left click, and you get a line. Okay, so if you're looking for a manual line command at the drawing level, this is it. Okay. Now, keep in mind, in general, with regards to Onshape drawings, the idea behind them is, you're really just documenting your 3D model. All we're doing is we're taking the 3D model, inserting some views, attaching some dimensions, and then moving on. Right. So we're not really, you won't be sketching things generally in this level. The idea behind a line is it just gives you that one tool to, fix any little situations, or if I had this one-off where I needed to do something, I have the option there. Now, the last icon in my list that I wanted to mention is Refine Graphics. And Refine Graphics can be particularly useful if you're doing, if I wanted to get the utmost detail. You'll notice that as I did this, I can see Refine Graphics. I get some resolution. You can see it kind of takes the arc and turns it into a series of straight lines. And for most users, they don't care about it. But if I'm really concerned about this looking with the utmost detail, I can use Refine Graphics to really clean up the drawing views. Right. Another question, can you change the hatch scale? I do not believe that's an option as of today. I do not believe there's a way to adjust hatch dimensions in any way as of today. Another question, if you modify the 3D model with the drawing views and the dimensions, update, and the answer is yes. Now, it's important to keep in mind that you do not edit the dimensions in the drawing. If I go back to my part and I change something, I come back to the drawing and update it. So it's keep in mind that the drawing views, again, are really just documenting the 3D model. So we go back to the 3D model to change it. And let's do that. Let's say I wanted to change the overall length. It's 5.75 here. Let's edit the dimension. And let's change this to, let's say, 5.875. Okay, so just a bit longer. Now, not a huge change, of course, but the idea behind it is now that dimension and really the drawing views are all out of date. Right? So how do we handle that situation? So I've made the change to the part. I go back to my drawing, and you're going to see a little icon appear. And I skipped over this early on because it wasn't available, but when the model has changed, the drawing view will the drawing in general will recognize it. So you'll see update from this workspace. I can click update, and it goes through and pulls all the latest values from the 3D model and pushes them into the drawing. So you don't have to do any work in terms of adding the dimensions again or replacing them. You see this dimension automatically updated. But it's important to point out, all those changes are done in the 3D model, and when you go back to your drawing, you'll see a little indication that something has changed and you need to rebuild the drawing. Another question, can you display an exploded view of an assembly? And you can display an assembly, of course, and you can create a view that's exploded. What we hope to accomplish in the future is automated tools for exploding assemblies. Right now, you would have to manually pull the assembly out like you do in many traditional CAD systems. But yes, you could take your assembly, pull it out into individual pieces, and create a drawing with that assembly. Okay? But that's another area where we hope to speed up the process and make it faster than what's been done in the past. Okay, so I've covered many of the tools. In fact, every tool in the toolbar. And I mentioned before that I wanted to go back to a certain point and point out the properties. And I mentioned this early on, the little wrench icon in the toolbar. And the reason I bring this up is you can change things like the dimension size or the number of decimal places that every dimension has. So that's another commonly asked question. What if I want 3 decimal places or 4 decimal places from the properties, right? Or what if I want the text size to be something else? So that's a very good question. And again, this is a scenario where the properties come into play. Keep in mind, though, that this only applies to the active drawing. The question, and this was asked earlier as well, can you insert named views from the model? And the answer is no. So if you wanted something other than the front, top, right, you would need to do something like a transform or rotate the model around. This is an area that we hope to improve, very soon. But as of today, your standard front, top, right, orthogonal style views are the options. All right. Now, we've mentioned many different things about creating drawings, but what about getting into more detail about using my own templates or importing and exporting? I've already briefly shown you that you can import anything. And again, the command to import, you'll find it under Create tab. You select Import, and you can browse to any DXF, DWG, or any number of different 3D formats as well, Parasolid, Step By. So remember, you can import anything into a document. You can even import Excel files and images and just store them as a tab within the document. But this is how you import. Browse to your DXF, DWG, and it imports as a tab into the document. But how do you export? Let's say that I wanted to take this drawing and convert it to a PDF. I can do that by right-clicking and choosing Export. Okay, you have options for DXF, DWG, and PDF. Okay? And also when you choose one of the DXF or DWG options, you have the ability to choose, of course, versions and the number of sheets. And by the way, this is recent as of just a week or two ago. So DXF, DWG, and PDF are the export options. Just choose one of them, hit export, and it exports that DXF as an option. Okay. So export's very simple. Import, again, you can select it from the import and just browse to your DXF or DWG. Question: since it's a cloud-based, can I assume that a huge assembly responds to my inputs and updates about as fast as one part in drawing in parametric environment? Um, since we are cloud-based, we can optimize a number of different things, including assembly performance, but drawing performance in general. And this is something that's constantly evolving. We can, dynamically allocate resources based on the complexity of your model. So we have the ability to do a lot of really detailed things to make the user experience better than anything you might get on your computer. Right? Remember, with your computer in a traditional CAD system, it's how much RAM you have. It's how good is your graphics card. With Onshape, those things aren't nearly as important because all of that important information is running in the cloud. So it makes us much more flexible. Okay. Question: does the DXF export automatically scale to 1:1? It's important to keep in mind it just exports the DXF of this drawing view, whatever the scale was of these views. Right? It's going to export this as a snapshot of the way it is right now. These were not 1:1 views. So if that's what you're looking for, there are two things I would recommend. First, if you want to create just a straightforward blank drawing with a DXF, you can do that. But you can also right-click a face and export to DXF, and this will assume a 1:1 conversion of just the geometry you're looking for. So a commonly asked question is, I need a DXF 1:1 for water jet, for example. You don't have to create a drawing for that. You can right-click a face and say export. But if you need to create a drawing, an option I would recommend is the custom template, and you can specify, no title block, and then change your views, make sure they're 1:1. But the export command just exports whatever you've created in this drawing, right? in the scale that it was originally created. Okay, so one last thing, and I only have a few minutes left to discuss it, and that is custom templates. So when I go to create a drawing, I have this My Templates option, and you'll see I have no templates currently. How do I use a DWT template that I've already created? Maybe I've been using AutoCAD a while, and I have these DWT files that I want to import and use in Onshape. How do we do that? So let's go back, and what I'm going to do, and this isn't required, it's just what I would recommend as a best practice, is just create a document called Drawing Templates. Okay. Again, you can import your templates into any document you want. So this is not a rule, it's just, it makes it easy to go back and add to it later. So I create this new document called Drawing Templates. And all I'm going to do with this is simply import my DWT file. Okay, so this is my custom ANSI C DWT file. I import it into the document, and that's it. Now, anytime I create a new drawing, this template will be an option. Okay, so let's delete these Part Studio and Assembly. I don't need them. So the only thing I'm going to keep in this document is drawing templates. And now when I go back, let's go back to my suspension bracket, and I choose to create a drawing, I now have my custom ANSI C as a DWT option. Right, so I can hit OK, and now I'm using my DWT file as a template to create new drawings in Onshape. Okay, so just a tip, if you have DWT files. Now, a commonly asked question, what if I don't? What if I have nothing and I want to customize my own template? What I would recommend is going to the Onshape provided templates. If you just do a search for Onshape ANSI, you'll find the document. And this document is just a list of all those templates I showed you earlier. And you can right-click and download any one of them and customize them. Okay, and then import those back into it. It's important to keep in mind that you're customizing them in your favorite 2D editor. We don't have a way today to customize them in Onshape. So you can download the DWT file. You can open it. My favorites would be something like AutoCAD or DraftSite. DraftSite's a free tool you can open up and edit these, and then import that DWT file back into Onshape and use it. Okay, so just a commonly asked question, what if I wanted to build my own templates? You would download your provided templates, customize them in your favorite 2D editor, and then import them into a document. So I am out of time. Forgive me. Just going forward, for those that are just getting started We really encourage you to try Onshape in your professional work and let us know what you think. I mentioned the feedback tool earlier, and a lot of the feedback I'm getting here today, definitely use the tool and let us know. We really do respond to user feedback as a way of us prioritizing new features. So really encourage you to use the feedback tool and let us know what you think. Also, invite others and share. If you haven't shared your document yet, if you haven't worked together in real time or collaborated with comments and follow mode and all the neat things that we have for collaboration, I definitely recommend it. It's a very powerful capability. Also, if you've been using Onshape a while and maybe you're interested in meeting local users or establishing your own user group, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to help you set things up. So that's what I had. I'm going to stick around and answer any questions. So, please feel free to ask them. But that's it, everyone. Thank you and have a good day.